Y'all not ready for this one. You want to know the real reason that evangelicals and the Christian nationalists voted for Trump? It's because they want someone who is like the God of the Old Testament. Let's get into it. If you're like many people, you've probably been scratching your head around the question of how is it that so many Christian evangelicals, more so the Christian nationalists, I'll just put them in one separate category. How is it that they continue to talk this man up as if he is God himself? How is it that they support so much of who he is and what he does unapologetically? How is it that they try to beat into their members' heads that this man is chosen by God, or this man is Christian, or this man is like God? The answer is actually pretty shocking. I remember during my time of deconstruction, in the very beginning stages, I was like, I want to read the Bible because I want to get closer to God. So I said, I'm going to start with the Old Testament and I'm just going to read all the way through. And what I realized when I opened the book and started reading the Old Testament is that, yikes, I don't think I like this person or this deity that I'm actually reading about. This deity does not have the characteristics of a person that I want to worship or admire. And so fast forwarding to today, that led me to realize that a lot of Christian nationalists, they like Trump because they see the God of the Old Testament in Trump. Okay, let's do a quick comparison. So in the Old Testament, I saw God as this angry, controlling, sort of narcissistic, and I know it's kind of scary for some people to hear me comparing God to narcissistic behavior. But if you read, it's always this need for excessive worship and admiration, and you must worship me. A few examples: Exodus 23, 3 through 10. You must not worship any other gods except me. You must not make any idols. I'm not going to read all of it. 2 Kings 17, 38, 39. Do not forget the covenant I have made with you, and do not worship any other gods. Worship the Lord your God. It is he who will deliver you from the hand of all your enemies. Exodus 34, 14. For thou shalt worship no other God, for the Lord whose name is jealous is a jealous God. It was like all of this excessive need for worship and admiration. And I used to be like, dang, God a little needy, a little a little narcissistic if you would, compare it to human terms. And then I thought about Trump, and I've always thought that Trump's personality was very narcissistic. He loves admiration. He needs it. If you've ever been connected to a narcissist, you know that they have a constant need for worship, admiration, validation. It is literally the only way that they can thrive.
If Donald Trump says jump 3 feet high and scratch your head, we all jump 3 feet high and scratch our heads.
They cannot function without these things. And they need praise. If they don't get the praise that they need, or if you start decreasing that level of praise that you once gave them, they're going to flip out on you. They're going to turn on you. And it made me think of JD Vance and how he's now, kissing his butt for lack of a better term, but like kind of enabling him and empowering him just as if he's the greatest thing on earth.
JD is kissing my ass. He wants my support.
But they don't realize, JD Vance doesn't realize that this is for a very short amount of time. The other thing I realized, of course, is narcissistic people are controlling and manipulative. Then I thought back to the Old Testament about how God would, let's use Pharaoh. God hardened Pharaoh's heart. When I read this story, I was just like, whoa, wait a minute. So Pharaoh, even if he wanted to let the children of Israel go, he couldn't, because God had chosen, like intentionally chosen, to harden Pharaoh's heart. When I read that, I was kind of upset because I was like, dang, at least, give another chance to see if he will. But it was against his will. Like, he did not have free will in that moment. So I just thought that was always weird that he was manipulative and controlling in that sense. Also, thinking back to Saul, when it talked about, I'll actually read it, and this is in Kings. So it says, now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. And I stopped, like, it's so many things that just made me stop in my tracks when I read it. And I was just like, wait, God sent an evil spirit to torment Saul so that David could play the harp for him and so that the evil spirit would leave? Doesn't that sound like a bunch of manipulation? Like, I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna read it again. Now the Spirit of the Lord had departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. Saul's attendants said to him, see, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command his servants here to search for someone who can play it was the harp, basically. He will play when the evil spirit from God comes on you, and you will feel better. I was just like, what? It's so many times that I just closed the Bible. But I'm bringing all of that up to say, like, do they see that level of manipulation and control in Trump? Absolutely. So it is a pretty solid comparison. But let's move on to another reason I feel like the Christian nationalists and evangelicals support Trump so heavily. All right, this is a pretty significant reason. A lot of preachers are big on these types of preachers. Again, I'm putting them into one category. If you are not a pastor that preaches this way, if your church is not this way, then you're not in that group. I'm talking about a specific group, and this is the Christian nationalists and evangelicals. They enjoy preaching from the Old Testament only because they have this idea of law and order as it relates to other people's salvation. They like that the God of the Old Testament was a punisher, was all about policing sin. It was about the laws and don't do this and don't do that. Back in the Bible days, the penalty for sinning was death. It was, you're going to get stoned, you're going to get your head chopped off, you're going to be in prison for sinning. For example, like Adam and Eve, their punishment, the Noah and the flood, what happened before the flood. It was sin in the world, so God had to wipe out everybody off the earth because he regretted making man. Lot's wife turned into a pillar of salt. Sodom and Gomorrah, whole city just wiped away, right? All because of sin. And so evangelicals love this ideology. It gives them this feeling of authority and power over other people's lives. I get to tell you how to live your life. God hates sin and God does that. So I get to play God and I get to tell you that what you're doing is wrong. And I get to police your salvation. They see, in my opinion, that Trump is all about punishing. He is against two major things, of course, that is illegal immigration and abortion, of course. So it's like they are so heavy on these two major issues that they don't even think about the other sins that Trump has committed. Do you know how many sins, if we want to talk about sins in the Bible, in the Old Testament, do you know how many sins there were just in Leviticus alone? Like, I'm going to put up something to just show you like the number of sins that were in the Bible. So it's like, if you want to talk about sin, then talk about it for real and don't just cherry pick to what you would call sins based on the Old Testament. But they don't care about that. And these are the same people that commit these heinous acts in private. They abuse their congregation. They take money. They sleep with members of their church. But none of that matters because they get to cherry pick and choose which verses apply to them. So the third reason that I wanted to get into is, and I think this is significant as well, they feel like God is justified regardless of anything God does, right? We're talking about Old Testament. I think it's very similar with Trump. So it doesn't matter what Trump says or does, how rude he is, they are okay with it. They're going to vibe with him. They're going to be for him. And it's just strange to know that it's this level of it plays with your mind, because it's like, how in the world could a person literally say or do anything and it does not matter? These people are so hardcore. We love Trump. He can do anything, get away with it. It's justified. But it is the same thing in the Bible, if you think about it. And now I'll kind of bring in the umbrella of all Christians. What Christianity as a whole is, no matter what God says or does or did in the Bible, in the Old Testament, New Testament, if it didn't make sense, it doesn't matter. People are going to justify their king, their God. God can allow terminal illnesses of perfectly good people. I mean, good people who actually live for him and pray to him. But then let's say they end up dying, suffering during their death even. But you ask a Christian and they say it was the will of God. It was the will of God that that person died a terrible death. He allows people to suffer who pray to him every day. Like, you have people crying out to him every day who are going through things. But for whatever reason, he doesn't answer their prayer. You ask a Christian, just continue praying, or you don't have enough faith, or God's will is best. You don't know. We can't question God. So everything is justified. He allows children to be born with birth defects. It does not matter. God is still good. It is justified. He allows cities to be destroyed with natural disasters, completely wiped out. God is on the throne. God has a fight. It's always justified. God allowed slavery of Africans and African Americans. Only God knows what he was doing. God, are you getting my point? It's the same exact way with Trump. And so I feel like this group of people sees Trump as an exact mirror of God of the Old Testament. And it's so strange because when I would read the Bible, I saw God and Jesus as like two totally different personalities. It was like, how is God of the Old Testament the same, or Father, right? However you look at it, depending on your denomination. Some see God and Jesus as different. Some see God and Jesus as one. We're not going to get into that. I just saw a very stark contrast between God and Jesus. God seemed to be merciless, like no mercy shown, like he don't care, angry, just out for blood, right? Then Jesus seemed to be like this loving man, full of grace, full of mercy, compassion, which actually sounds more like the other candidate, but that's not important. I'm not going to get into that. But he sounded more accepting, more loving. But that was just always interesting to me, that they just felt like two very different people. And I was like, I can't see myself worshiping God of the Old Testament. I don't see myself worshiping anybody at this point, or anything. However, if I had to pick one, definitely New Testament Jesus over Old Testament God. But let me know in the comments, guys, what you think. If there's any validity to this theory, it's my opinion. If you guys feel the same way, if this is something that you may not have ever thought of, but do does God and Donald Trump God of the Old Testament and Donald Trump kind of marry each other? And do you think that is why Christian nationalists, evangelicals are so hardcore about getting this man into the presidency, which he is officially already in? All right, guys, until the next time, hope you enjoy. Please subscribe. I am almost at 1,000 subscribers, and I truly appreciate your support. Until next time.